Hey Matt,
Coach. All
can
right,
you hear me all right?
hear you great.
You know what? I realize them on those Zoom calls that we have for conference calls. Um, what a mess my office looks like. Should I clean up a little bit back there for you?
That looks about the same size as your Blackbird office.
It's a, it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit, or actually, you know what? No, it is. It's smaller.
It might be smaller.
I got, I got Jojo's old office. He gave me that last year.
What happened to us and all this gray hair you and I got?
I know. Oh no. Yeah. And it's not the computer screen. It's real.
That's why I wear a hat.
I probably should get one.
It's great to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Good seeing you too. Hang on, let me turn the volume up here so I can hear you. I don't know what all these other messages are.
I don't know if there's anything coming from me. So
No, it was just don't ask me to chat anything while we're talking. I don't know how to do any of that.
I want this to be as easy as pie. You and I are gonna have a conversation. It's recording now, but I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back and edit it. And, if I don't start recording when I turn the thing on, I forget to press record. So, but I'll go back. So we'll get started, and I'm going to pause for a few seconds, and then I've got a few questions just to get us going. And I want to talk about our time back in the SLIAC, but I want to dive into recruiting. I want to dive into motion offense, and for me, I want it to be organic. I just kind of want to see where it goes. So,
Sure.
you have questions? Ask. If you think things that you want to talk about, we'll roll, and we'll go about 35, 45 minutes.
Okay.
Is that good with your timeline?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
And at some point, I'll kind of sum everything up and shut it down and stop the record button, and then we can say goodbye and
Sounds good.
get ready for practice. And I'll get ready. You got game tonight or practice then?
No, we got practice tonight. I was gonna ask you before we get started, like, how's your team? How's everything going with?
Tonight's first game. So
Oh, good luck tonight.
yeah, we scrimmaged Saturday, and it's like whenever you take over a new program, you're teaching kids how to walk and take two steps at it, one step, and then follow the second step. So I got a really great group of kids. They work their butts off. They're really smart. Our school is typically ranked 1 or 2 in the state of Colorado for academics.
Mhm.
So it's a really behaviors way up there. Academic work ethics way up there. I think we've led the state in SAT scores 4 straight years. So I get really good kids. For a public school, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not real big, you're in my life story, so we're going to move and really teach them how to screen and how to read a screen and how to react to a screen. And so, but it'll be fun.
Just off the record, or I guess it's on record, but off podcast record, we've scrapped this year.
Have you?
Started doing it, and it was kind of similar to what you said. Like I really like our group. Like I
Yeah.
like being with them every day. But we've got 5 returners who are pretty. They kind of, we ran some motion stuff last year and they picked it up.
Right.
But all the new players, it was just really slow. And you know how it is. You play that first game, you've been practicing against yourself, and then it's like molasses, like, oh my goodness. And we try to project forward. We're gonna get it, but by the time we get it, might be February. And so we kind of simplified some things and kept some quick hitting motion actions, but just structured it like with sets and calls and
It's so funny you say that. I don't know. I got a video on something, and it was Jamie Dixon. Somebody was asking him about when he went to TCU from Pittsburgh, what was the hardest part of the transition? And he goes, it was teaching the kids how to run when they didn't have the ball in their hands. College kids. This is Division I. He goes, if you didn't have the ball, we had 4 guys standing watching the other guy do something with it. And teaching them how to move when they didn't have the ball in their hands and how to be crisp with their cuts and spacing. And so I've had that thought in my head all day, because we're going through the same thing. If I don't have the ball in my hands, well, I'll just stand here and wait for something to happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been interesting. Well, we'll jump we'll jump into this.
Good. Probably took up
Yeah, or
what
we're going to talk
about
to
right there.
yeah.
Sorry.
I'm just going to pause for 3 seconds and then we'll go. I'm gonna stop the recording and then I'll start it again.
Okay.
Coach Kaneshiro, it is such a pleasure to have you on. You and I go back, I don't know, 20 plus years now.
Wow, has it been that long?
2001. When were you back in the SLIAC at Blackburn?
It was the early 2000s. Yep.
Because
Or Black at Blackbird was, yeah, early 2000s. I was, but when I was at Webster and you were at Maryville, started at Maryville, that was probably right around 2000.
it was there was a little bit of crossing there.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was kind of the heyday of the SLIAC. We had a lot of fun
In our minds anyway, right?
Yeah. But I talked to Bunch about this at Webster, Chris Bunch at Webster. We had him on the other podcast, and I don't remember ever being in a league where you could walk into a room and everybody was happy to see you. We all were friends as much as we were competitors.
Yes.
Did you feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was, and it's something, we were both a lot younger back then as young coaches. It was my first college job there at Webster, and then even at Blackburn, I was still relatively young, definitely compared to what I am now. And I don't know that I appreciated it as much as I should have. But now, reminiscing like this, talking like this, it was, those are great times. I mean, just from a coaching perspective, but like you said, just the relationships, friendships that, it was great.
We had some amazing battles. There didn't matter whose gym you were going into, and it didn't matter what year it was. If you escaped with a victory, you did something really well that night.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I mean, good coaches who got their teams to play really hard.
Yeah.
And execute. And you're exactly right. It didn't really matter the record or whose gym you were in, home game.
Yeah.
If you got a victory in conference, you felt good about it that night for sure.
Yeah, I still pull out film from those years. I've downloaded a couple of games from those seasons, and I show my high school kids. I go, this is how you work. This is how you battle. This is how you without the ball, and it's a master class in a lot of those games. Because I tell kids, I don't remember what year it was. It must have been 04, 05, somewhere around there, where your best player. You tell me if I'm misremembering this, and you're going to tell me his name too. But I don't think he ever started a game in high school. And by the time he was a junior at Blackburn, he was the MVP of the league. Am I misremembering that?
You might be giving me more credit. That might have been Coach Ramsey, who was right before me. Maybe. I don't know. Luka Jedovic was conference MVP, and that
was with you though, right?
But his sophomore and junior or senior season,
right?
Coach Ramsey recruited him, and I think he was freshman of the year in the conference, if I'm not mistaken.
But
then I think
he never started a game in high school though, right?
I didn't even realize that then. Then that could be true. I didn't even realize that. That's amazing.
You or Joe told me that he was like the sixth man on a really good high school team.
And that must have been Joe. Yeah. Well, Joe did all the work, and I reaped the benefits the next years.
Joe was a great coach. Don't get me wrong. He was one of the best of the best. But what you got out of that group of kids was pretty amazing. That was
a special group. I was really, really fortunate to walk into that situation. I mean, both in terms of the quality of the character of those student athletes that Joe Ramsey recruited, and their ability. I mean, he like I said, they were really young, and we had a lot of key returners back that next year, and said, I was fortunate to reap the benefits of that. So.
I was always impressed what you did with that group though. But you know what, Luka with the ball in his hands was something else, but he made everybody else better. And you put them in that situation with that motion offense you run. And because did you have a kid over 6'5" on that team?
No, no, we didn't have six. No. Dude, I can't remember. It's funny how the game's gone, where it's all guards,
Right.
forwards, and positionless. I mean, that's what we were doing back then, almost, but
Yeah.
out of necessity,
You were
because we
way,
didn't
you were way
have
ahead. Yeah.
6'3", six. I'm trying to think who our Nick Barnett was
Yeah.
a athletic, but he was more of a forward, not a
Yeah.
true little post player.
What was he, 6'4"?
Was he six? He could really jump, so he played 6'4". I don't know if he was actually that big,
He was
but
a great player too.
yep.
Hey, Coach,
So
before we get too deep into this, I want to thank you for the great piece you wrote in my book. And for anybody that wants to read it, Coach wrote at the end of chapter 5, you wrote a great piece on online recruiting. And I specifically sought you out because you've got one of the toughest recruiting jobs on the planet, being in Hawaii. You can't get across to the lower 48. You can't get there very often. And when you do, it has to be maximize your time and your space. So I want to dive in a little bit of recruiting, and then I definitely want to talk motion basketball with you. So for young coaches out there and anybody that's trying to teach motion, anytime they can get their eyes on your practices or game film, there's nothing better in terms of motion basketball than the way you teach it. But I want to talk a little bit about evaluating. When you walk into a gym, what are some of the things you're looking for? What are some of the things that catch your eye when you're looking at a ball player?
sure. I mean, I think all coaches are looking at talent, athletic ability, and I'm no different. Don't get me
Right.
wrong, right? Like there's a certain baseline of, regardless of what level you're at, there's a certain baseline of athletic ability, size, quickness, and skill level
Yeah.
that the player has to have. But I think most coaches can recognize that. I think it kind of goes beyond that. Like we were talking, reminiscing about some of the teams in the SLIAC that we coached, and
Right.
players that, like, I think what made some of those teams really, really good, or as good as they were, was the quality of the character of those players. Right.
Right.
Like, I mean, they were unselfish, played hard, had consistency in their effort. I mean, day to day, night to night, game to game. And they were, they were team players who could fit as part of a team. They were willing to fill a role, whatever that role was.
Right.
So I think some of those intangibles, the character, the unselfishness, for definitely, for sure, that look at those things.
Right.
You had brought up the recruiting aspect. When I am fortunate enough to go to a game, you probably, like most coaches do, show up early, watch them in warmups. What's the attention to detail like? Are they just kind of going through the motions, or are they really getting ready to play? Timeouts, halftime, they're out of the game, they're cheering on the bench, all those type of things. I think that's,
I don't think kids know that we're watching them when they're on the bench.
yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's more valuable. And I've read about coaches, whether they're going to a game or requesting film, like, to see a player when they're not having their best game,
Right.
and to see how they react, what kind of teammate they are, what kind of leadership skills do they have,
Right.
all of those type things when it's hard. Because those are the really good teams. I mean, if you're a good team and you play against another good team, it's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. And you've got to, some players have a hard time battling through that, persevering through that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Those are things that I think you talk about all coaches, but I don't think all coaches notice those things. I don't think every coach sees the character. And I think it goes back to how we played. You know, I know you were a hard-nosed point guard. You defended tough. You had great vision. How you saw the floor really separated you and your ability to shoot it. But you find yourself looking for recruits that you would want to play with or have similar mindsets to you. Do you feel that while you're
For
recruiting?
sure, for sure. You know, and I mean, definitely. I mean, I think right off the bat, you know, when you walk into a gym or you watch a game, you can kind of, I don't know. I guess it's like you said, it in terms of how we played. There's some players that are, what's the term? Maybe more aesthetically pleasing to
Right.
the eye,
Does
right? The
that
eyes
draw
of the
you? Does that
beholder.
draw you to them?
Yeah, I think it does. And you know, to be honest, I mean, it does. Sometimes it's a negative, because you know maybe you need more diversity,
Yeah.
right? Like you just, um, I mean, an example would be, right, like you want players who aren't selfish and that pass the ball, but you still need someone that can finish,
That's
and the play
right.
can look great, but if the ball doesn't go in the basket, so sometimes that player that maybe doesn't catch your eye because of the passing ability or the vision,
Right.
but boy, they can score it, you know.
Right.
You know, I think that's something as I've gotten older and a little bit more experienced in coaching and recruiting, you kind of realize like you do need that balance. You know, maybe this player doesn't have the IQ or the feel that maybe you don't, you know, that
Right.
you really gravitate towards, but boy, they can bring something to the team that you're trying to put together. So
Right.
yeah, there's definitely no uh perfect.
There's no box you can put a recruit in. Right.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
When
then you complicate that because sometimes, or most of the time, you know, you probably don't get the first choice that you're going
that's
after. So,
right.
you know, you try to do the best you can.
That's right. When you think about how you recruit and you think about your board, I'm sure you have some kind of board or on computer file or
Mhm.
something. How far ahead are you looking at your roster going, okay, she's going to graduate in a year or two, she's how far back do you go saying, okay, I got to start looking at some sophomores here? Because when we lose that scoring, when we lose that 12, 15 points per game, I don't have anybody in house that can do that. So how far ahead do you start looking?
I mean, in all honesty, I'm not that far ahead. And not because I don't think it's important and
Right.
all of those type thing. It's more the staffing situation, you
Right.
know, here where, you know, I'm the only full-time coach on staff. So, you know, the vast majority of the recruiting, you know, I'm doing by myself. So it's more of the situation. But certainly the players in state and definitely on our island here and on the big island here on Hawaii. I mean, I've see them regularly. And now that my daughter's, you know, a senior in high school, there
Crazy.
are a lot
Oh,
of players her age that I've seen grow up.
right.
You kind of know. So from that standpoint, you know, I am able to look ahead a little more.
Right.
Like, hey, we're gonna do so and so in a couple of years, so we need someone to fill that void. Um, but just because of, you know, the time and more the situation that we have here.
Sure.
We're not too far ahead, but certainly, like you said, you know, try to work as far ahead as possible and
Yeah.
always be ahead for sure.
If you see a sophomore at a game where you're going to see a senior and you see a sophomore that's got some talent, will you call the coach? Will you drop a note on him?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. You know, you're always kind of following up. You know, the problem would be not problem, but the challenge would be, you know, following up as much as you wanted to, you know, relative to um, your feeling about that player.
Right.
You know, there are a lot of good players that are sophomores that, boy, they would be a great fit, but you know, you kind of have to put together next year's team first before
Right.
you can do that. So,
The
but
cart before
no,
the horse oftentimes gets in the
exactly,
way.
but
Yeah.
absolutely, and that happens all the time. You're looking at a player and see someone, hey, they look pretty good, and let's definitely make a note and
Right.
follow up initially because we want to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Yeah. I've one of my biggest faults as a recruiter is I fall in love with a kid. I'll see him play one time. Oh God, that kid does everything I want them to do. You can envision them in your offense and your defense, right?
For
And then,
sure.
and then you kind of forget I've got to maintain some emotional control here. I need to see him on film a couple more times. I need to see him, 8 months from now. What do they look like? Has it changed or their attitudes changed? And I was one of those recruiters that I saw you once and oh gosh, and I couldn't let go of that. Are you like that, or do you have more patience than I have?
No, I think I can definitely relate to that. And I'm sure probably made a few mistakes in terms of because
Right.
that initial reaction. And I probably made a few mistakes the other way, right? Where you
Yeah.
see someone and you think, oh, okay, they're just not a good fit, or they're not, and maybe didn't watch them again,
Right.
or kind of follow up on some of the other references that you trust that are saying, hey, no, you got to take a look at her. So,
Right.
um, yeah, it's hard. It's hard. That balance, finding that balance and that balance, like you said, that control. Because I think all coaches do that, right? Like you
Yeah.
see a player and you can, exactly like you said, you can envision them fitting into your offense and defense, and um, yeah,
I'm always impressed with coaches. They can go watch a kid play and go, wow, I really love that kid. And they can kind of decompartmentalize it and say, I'm going to come back to that kid. I really like that kid. I'm going to put a gold star on him, but I'm still looking. I'm still finding the next
yeah.
person, see if there's something better. I
I mean,
really appreciate coaches that do that
mhm.
because
And
I've always struggled with it.
yeah, that's a challenge, definitely, that I've gone through at times for sure. You kind of feel like, okay, we're good there, and you kind of move on, whether it's to another position or, but yeah, to those coaches that kind of keep grinding away, and
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a lot of respect for that.
I remember there was a young kid by the name of Brandon Mooney, and I went and watched. I was there to watch somebody else play, and he was on the floor on the other team, and he just dominated the game. He must have scored 32 points, and and the kicker with Brandon was he was 5'5", just teeny tiny, and in my head, my head's going, he's way too small for our league, way too small. But I was kept seeing him do things with the ball in his hands that I was like, it doesn't matter. 6'3" guarding, boom, score. Got by him, score. And what I didn't put enough, and where I really hurt Brandon by recruiting him, is I had such an older group coming back that next year, and I couldn't put the ball in his hands like his high school coach could and say, Brandon, it's your show. We just didn't have the depth. We didn't have the minutes for him to be that guy he was in high school. So now he had to be a role player at 5'5",
Mm-hmm.
and I hurt him. And it was just, he was the wrong kid for me, even though I loved his game. I made the mistake of recruiting him because he just wasn't. If I had, if I was graduating 7 seniors and I didn't like my junior class, it would have been perfect. I could have built an offense around him. Have you been in that situation? Have you made those decisions? And you're like,
Yeah, for sure. I think you know, it's recruiting in life, right? All about timing. And
yes,
sometimes, and exactly what you described. I mean, that probably happens to a lot of coaches where you get the player that you want, and it just, for whatever reason, isn't quite the right fit. And a lot of it has to do with timing, and sometimes you don't even know because sometimes you're returning that junior class that you weren't expecting. They put in a lot of work during the summer.
right.
They come back, and obviously they're more experienced in your system. And all of a sudden, things aren't quite what you envisioned when you saw that particular recruit. So I think that happens to a lot of coaches, and certainly, it's happened to us in the past. I mean,
Yeah.
you try to do your best, right?
Right.
And get all the pieces together. But yeah, it's happened for sure.
I always thought you were great in that world, because you take a kid that maybe was a nice role player as a freshman or sophomore, and they would come back the next summer and they would be transformative. They would be a different, almost like a different human being. What are you doing? And I know how humble you are. I can see it on your face. You're going to give credit to the kid, but I know what you're doing in terms of technique and drills. But what do you think your kids are? What are you teaching your kids that allow them to grow the way they do in your program?
Boy, and it's not humility or anything. I mean, I don't really believe that we're doing anything different than most other coaches are doing. We do spend time on individual development, a lot of fundamentals, footwork,
Yes.
balance, shoot, and to be honest, we've kind of been some years good here at Hilo, some years not so good shooting the ball. So we've been inconsistent. That's something that I think over the last several years we've put more time into, especially in the spring. We don't have the exact same rules that Division I has in terms of the access in the summertime.
Right.
But when the season's over, we do spend, we've changed that, where it's gone to a lot more individual development in the spring. And usually in the spring, right, like you have some seniors that you're losing. So you can sort of tailor workouts a little bit more towards individuals. So maybe Matt Rogers needs to be a little stronger with the ball, so we can spend some time, working against the pad and ball handling and finishing inside. And Dave Kaneshiro needs to work on his outside shot, so we'll spend some time there. And I think with the smaller group, you're able to do that a little bit better in the spring, whereas in the season, you're caught up with team.
Yeah.
We're still trying to do individual stuff, but obviously there's a lot more team involved during the regular season. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Yeah.
And we try. I mean, to be honest, we talk to the player a lot. Like, hey, what are you comfortable with? Like, I'm watching on film, and this would be a lot of times. I mean, these conversations I think go on year round during the season, but definitely all after the season. Like, hey, we get you the ball in these situations. You look pretty comfortable. What do you think about this? And then, you just try to build on it. Like try to, I can't remember who it was. I think it was Brad Stevens one time listening to a interview, and it's like soaring with your strengths, and that's something that I really didn't think of much. You're always trying to improve on weaknesses, but yet there's always a reason why that player is on your team. He was talking about NBA players, obviously.
Right.
So to get them to do what they do well as they can do it, maybe even a little bit better. Like that's something that I probably didn't pay enough attention to, but we've tried to hear a little bit more.
Yeah. When you're a small school coach, you're not getting a lot of the A+ players. You're going to have a team full of Bs that you're trying to get everybody to that B+ A- range. Where Brad Stevens had,
Sure.
you got Justin Tatum and you got Jalen. There's a lot of things you can do. Even when he was at Butler, he always had those 2 or 3 kids that could really do a lot of things and were really dynamic. When you're a small school coach, D3, NAI, small D2, you've got to build everybody up. You got to get everybody stronger.
Sure.
Everybody's shooting's got to get better. If you do have that ace in the hole, it's rare. And there's oftentimes comes baggage with that ace if you get them. Right?
Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes
I'm gonna
there's a reason. No, exactly. I probably shouldn't comment further on that, but exactly, sometimes that happens. But no, and I think it kind of comes back to what we talked about earlier in recruiting, in terms of the character of the player. And there's I'm talking to other coaches or even business people that maybe run a business or anyone that has to interview and hire people. How do you know? How do you know that this person's gonna be trying to continuously improve and have that discipline and passion for what they're doing? That hey, when no one's around, they're gonna have the discipline to go in the gym and not just be in the gym for a couple hours, but not get anything done, but real productive work. And fortunately, we've been able to find some of those players, and they've definitely improved and help the team. And just personally, I mean, you and I both know, I mean, those are the fun players to coach.
Yeah.
Because they get better. And I think like any teacher, when you see your students improve, it just makes it that much more fun, that much more rewarding.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've talked to you about for years, but one of the things that's always impressed me about your teams is how well they screen and how well they use space and how well they create space. And you can't watch your teams play and how they screen and how they move and how they get open and then how they react when they're not open to get somebody else open. In your eyes, teaching those components, how much better does that make a player over, let's say, working on just shooting the ball and getting their feet set? How much better does that improve your offense when you've got 5, 6, 7 girls that all know how to use that screen, all know how to create space, all know what to do when they don't have space? What does that do for you?
Yeah, well, I think it's just so much harder to guard, right? Like if you have those, like you said, if you have 5 players out there who are working together, and can play off of one another, so to speak. I mean, I know from a defensive standpoint, those teams are so much harder to guard, versus when you're just kind of loading up on 1 or 2 players. So, it's, we spend a lot of time on it. I mean, we were joking about it earlier before we started that we've kind of gone away from some of that.
Right.
That like as far as the amount of screening, off-ball screening anyway, things like that. But we still have it as a part of our offense just because I still think it's really hard to guard. But I think we probably, and the game's changed. I mean, that was a long time ago when you know, so we probably spend more time now on it's the same idea, same concept of all the other 4 players playing off of whoever has the ball, but a lot of it is more now, okay, what happens when we drive it in this direction? Where does everyone go?
Right. Or the
And then
react principles.
yeah, some of that for sure.
Yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunate. I mean, even when we were screening more as part of our motion, we still had that as part of our offense. And I think we still worked on it a lot. I think it's just a greater emphasis now with everyone, with the way the game has changed,
Yes.
right? The spacing is different. But coming back to your question, I think, the teams that can really like maintain spacing throughout a possession,
Yes.
regardless of what action goes on, whether it's a screen, a cut, a drive, and get to that second and third side or second and third action and still maintain that spacing. Those teams are really hard to guard.
Yes.
And yet when you get in tough games and you play good teams, because those good defensive teams are going to be able to cover, your first action, maybe even your second, right? Like you just have to. So that's difficult to do. We're definitely not there yet. I mean, it's still not quite December, so we're still working on that.
You'll get them there. Your team's always played their best in February. You and I see the game that way in terms of the linearness of it. And I tell my kids this all the time. we've got 4 games this week. We're going to play tonight. We're going to play Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in a tournament. I told them, this is our preseason. We're not worried about the scoreboard. We're not worried about wins and losses. By the time we get to Sunday morning, we want to know, okay, what are we really good at? What do we got to get better at? Who are we? You know, do we have a philosophy? Do we have something that really makes us, that defines us?
Sure.
And again, that's why you were so hard to prepare for. Your teams were so hard to prepare for, because no matter what we did against you, if I told them, okay, we're going to sag off that screen, we're not going to let you guys back cut us, because your teams were so good. If we overplayed, boom, you'd back cut us. We're going to play soft on that back cut, and then you'd in screen the screen and you'd flare and you'd get a 3 and you guys would kill us from outside. And I appreciate it. And I stole so much from you by watching the way you screened. And I've implemented so many of those things in my offense now. You know, I watch a game now at the college level, and there's so few flare screens. Nobody uses a flare to get us to the corner. And you watch what Steve Kerr's done in Golden State, and he's just owned that flare and that double and that, reading off the screen. And you were doing that 20 years ago,
Well, it's funny that you said that. Well, couple of things. I mean, number one, I remember Coach Marty Simmons, who I was really blessed at that particular time when I was the head coach at Blackburn. Joe Ramsey was our athletic director. He was head coach at Oklahoma, coach at Millikan University, and then obviously coach the year at Blackburn. Just a terrific basketball mind that I got to talk to regularly. Coach Simmons was at Edwardsville for a few years, and so I was able to go there and watch them practice. And obviously him having been at Evansville and Indiana and with Coach Cruz and playing for Coach Knight. And so as far as like motion offense, it didn't get any better than like learning from those sources. And Coach Simmons said, that was one of the great things. He said it didn't matter whether they were playing another D2 team, an NBA team. He told his players, like, that was in motion. There was always an answer if you execute.
Right.
Kind of coming back to what you said, you went under it, there was an out cut, or I think they called it a change cut. I'm not sure, but there was always an answer. And that's, I think, philosophically why we did it first as long as we did it. I stayed with it as a coach.
Yeah.
And then kind of the second point, but why we've maybe gone away from it a little bit recently is because it just takes so long for those players to get in sync. But the Warriors are a perfect example, because that core has been together for so long. I mean, they run blocker mover on steroids, right?
They do.
They're always screening for Curry and Klay Thompson.
Yeah.
Draymond's got the ball, and he always is looking for them.
Yep.
And the screeners will give the ball up, whether it's a dribble handoff or pass, and they're always looking to get them open. But to get 5 players, or even 3, your cutter, your screener, and your passer on the same page, that takes some time. And
it does. It takes such a commitment from the kids.
Yes.
Because to me, that's what's changed. They don't want to make that commitment to a role anymore. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the role, it's the recognition, of because you could have 2 players execute perfectly, the cutter and the screener, but if the passer's not on time or not looking in that direction, it just doesn't work. And so it takes a lot of commitment on the part of the players. It takes a lot of commitment on the part of the coach to stick with it, and that's always a balance, right? Like, okay, it's November and we're still not quite getting it right. Like, how do we simplify this or change it, or do we stick with it? And I think, and then there's just so many, like you said, there are fewer teams playing that way.
Right.
They're growing up. So when you get a player, it's not it's not like it was 20 years ago where everyone's moving off the ball and screening off the ball. You know, I think
Yeah.
people were doing different things, but it's different. But I still think it's hard to guard for sure. If you can get a team to execute like that, it's really hard to guard.
It's such beautiful basketball when you
It, it
get a group of kids to commit to it.
yeah, yeah. Or
So
for sure. I mean, you know, eye of the beholder, but I agree with you. I'm right there with you. Like when I see it, it's really fun to watch.
well, it's so frustrating for the opponent because if you can't teach that level of patience to your defense,
Yes.
now all of a sudden you have to make a decision. All right. If we know we can't play that game with them, now we either got to be the hammer and be really, really physical, or we got to try and play in the backcourt and press them and not allow them to get into that. And that's what's so great about your offenses over the years is you put coaches in the position where they just threw their hands up and say, we're not going to try and play half court with these guys. You know, and how did you feel as the coach on that side when you saw them go to that 2-3 zone because they couldn't handle your screens?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, at that time, the teams you're referencing, you know, we had pretty good shooters,
Right.
you know, out there. So when teams went zone, you know, you felt pretty good about it. The other thing too is zones generally, you know, if you have a good passing team,
Yes.
which you need if you're going to run motion offense.
Right.
If you have a good passers and shooters, you're probably going to have pretty good success, you know, with it, against a zone as well. So, you know, like I said, it was just fortunate. Like a lot of things came in place. Coach Ramsey recruited a great group, and they were well schooled by him the year before, and you know, and then we were able to keep a group like what we were talking about, a core group together for about 2 or 3 years. And so once they learned to work with one another, yeah, they were able to have some pretty good success.
Oh, I know you've been coaching women now for what, 15 years?
Has it been 15? It's about 15. It's close.
Gotta be close, right?
13, 14.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
2000.
yes.
When
We moved back in 06,
Okay.
2010. My son was born. I should remember. I should be able to
Yeah.
recall this quicker.
Your
My
daughter
son
was
was born.
born.
My son was born during my first year as head coach here in December.
Okay.
So that
That's
was
right. I remember
2010.
you and I talking about that. Yeah, it was Christmas
Yeah.
time. We talked when
He was, yeah.
yeah.
Our kids, you can tell they were basketball kids even before they were basketball kids. They were both born on a day off.
That's right. That's great.
So
Luckily.
I was able to be there for both of them.
Yeah, I was too. I was smart. The first one we had this summer, that was smart. We planned that one. And the second one we had on January 21st, right in between conference games, which just killed me. Yeah. What have you found, Coach? Number one, what's the biggest difference between coaching boys and girls, which I'm sure you get asked a lot. And how have you changed as a coach with that transition?
You know, before taking this job, I asked that of a lot of coaches, women's basketball coaches, especially males, because obviously there's, you know, that there's probably some challenges with that. But and they all sort of said the same thing was like, you know, you just coach them. I mean, obviously the athletic ability, the size, and those things, especially at that time, was probably a lot different. But I mean, the women's game has grown and improved and it kind of exploded here in the last few years, especially at the highest levels, you know, and not just in terms of the amount of exposure. I mean, obviously that's exploded, you know, in terms of whether it's WNBA or Division I Final Four, you know, the amount of people going and the exposure that they get, but just the game, the athleticism, the skill level. You know, you turn on ESPN and you hear the people saying they'd rather watch Caitlin Clark than, you know, a lot of the guys. And
Yeah.
you could probably go right on down the line. So it's changed. And even certainly at the Division II level where I coach at, you know, players are more athletic, more skilled, bigger, and there are more of them. You know, there's definitely still a gap between us and Division I and probably the levels of Division I, but the game's grown a lot. And kind of coming back to your original question, I think, to be honest, we don't coach. There's not a whole lot of different. I mean, we probably work on maybe specific things like finishing around the basket a little bit more because of the size.
Sure.
You know, but in terms of shooting, footwork, um, you know, whether it's driving angles or how to use your body or and certainly all the team stuff, we teach it exactly the same in
Right.
terms of your spacing and how to play off of another player, whether it's a drive, or, you know, like I said, we're not running the motion exactly the way we did 20 years ago, but a lot of the screens are still in our offense, and we're basically same teaching points that we taught it back then.
Right. Doesn't matter what offense you're running. If you can set that screen and it's two kids working together to create offensive scoring opportunities, the offense is going to work.
Yeah. You know, there's, like Coach Simmons said way back all those years ago, there's always an answer. There's an answer, you know, if you execute. So, yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of difference. And you know, even, and I have people say this to me all the time, and I have to say, like, well, that hasn't necessarily been my experience. You know, we'll talk about the emotional aspect and almost like it's going to be different. But I mean, you could probably talk to some of our players. I mean, I don't have probably the energy that I did, you know, to get after them like I did 25 years ago, you know, like we did at Blackburn, and probably some of that was not warranted anyway.
Exactly. Yes.
But when it's time to work or to correct somebody or to coach someone hard, I mean, I think I'm probably every bit as tough on them here as I was at, you know, with some of our players at Blackburn, you know, at that particular time, and they can take it. I mean, it's not any different. I think it's more comes down to the individual, like what we talked about in recruiting,
right?
You know, the character, mental toughness, and do they want to get better, and their willingness to be coached. I mean, that's, you know, if they are, like I said, I haven't found a lot of difference between, you know, the philosophical approach, you know, between then and now.
That's kind of what, you know, I coached the college women for 3 years, and I felt the same way. I felt like they almost were asking me to push them more, you know, and wanted more, you know, and I loved coaching the women. I really did. You know, there's differences and, you know, in personalities and emotions, but in terms of playing the game and executing the game, I thought both were equally fun to coach in different ways. You know, you're not going to throw a whole lot of lobs, but, you know, the teams you and I had at coaching men, there wasn't a whole lot of guys we could throw lobs to, you know. So it was all about.
I could throw a few Blackburn players under the bus right now, but I'm not, in case they're listening. But yeah, there weren't a whole lot of lobs going up in Carlin.
Well, heck, they're almost 40 years old. They could take it.
There was one that threw one in a practice. He tells a story. He reminded me of something years ago. Let's just say they ran a lot after that happened.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well,
I forgot.
Go ahead.
No, I said I forgot about that until he reminded me. And then it came back to me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I went back to Maryville, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, and the school got the team together for one of the national tournament teams, and we went out to a restaurant and bar afterwards, and they spent 2 hours, reminded me of all the things that I said in practice, and totally, all the things that I completely forgot that would come out of my mouth. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. I said that?
I was about to say, did you remember like half of them?
No, no.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's not just me then, because sometimes
No.
they'll bring stuff up and I don't really remember that. And that's sounds like something I should remember.
Exactly. I said, you guys must have been real lazy that day if I said something like that to you. So, well, Coach, I love our friendship and so thankful for our friendship for these last 20 years. And I'm so impressed with how you coach and how you go about your business, and so thankful that you're still in the coaching world and teaching these kids how to play the game the right way. And um, anybody that's listening that's got a 13 through an 18-year-old girl that wants to play college basketball, there's really no better place for you to go than Hawaii-Hilo, and take a look at if they want to just live in the worst place in the world, where it's 75 degrees year round. There's beaches everywhere, and all the people are kind and caring. And but if you're listening, take a look at Hawaii-Hilo, because you're going to get coached well. You're going to become a better person. You're going to become a better player. And Coach, it just means a lot to me that you did this with me. And I always love talking hoops with you. This was more selfish than anything else.
Well, Coach, I appreciate the kind words. I'll slip you $20 after this. The check's in the mail.
Not
But
necessary.
no, in all seriousness, I feel exactly the same way about you. I think you know the respect and love I have for you and your family, and just I'm so glad that you're coaching, got a team of your own this year. Those boys are really lucky and fortunate and blessed to have you, because I know you coach the game, but you coach them in life as well. So that's what I think that's why we got into it,
Yeah.
At the Division III level, and it's still it's really rewarding. But I know you do a great job with that. So
They
really
don't
happy.
always, they wouldn't agree with you after yesterday's practice, but it's
Well, at the time they never do, or very few do, but eventually, like you said, when we get back together,
yeah.
and that means a lot, right? Like when they you get together and they kind of say thank you and
Yeah.
show their appreciation for that. So
Yeah, you and I have that forethought. We know what 10 years is going to look like for them. We know what 20 years is going to look like for them. And we know what we want that relationship to be during those years and long after they're done playing with us. So yeah, that means the world to me. And, when we look back at those years we were together with Matt Mitchell and Chris Bunch and Lee McKinney and Joe Ramsey, and we were surrounded by role models. Mark Edwards, throw Mark
sure.
to, we were just
Yep.
surrounded by coaches that made us all better.
Yep.
We had to step up our game every Wednesday and Saturday, or,
Yeah, exactly.
we were going to walk out of that gym with our heads down and our tails between our legs. So, and it wasn't just, just basketball. Basketball was just a small piece of that. That's why I feel really blessed for those 10 years I had in St. Louis, because I just became a better person and a better man as much as I became a better coach because of guys like you. So thank you again. Thank you for the book. Thank you for the time. I'm so happy your kids are doing well, and you give my best to your wife and family. And I'm going to try and get out and see you here in the next couple of years.
That would be awesome. But Matt, or one more thing before, like, thank you for writing that book. I think that's the way you delivered all of the messages. I think it's for those who are listening now. I mean, it's definitely well worth the time to go out and get that book and look through it. It's great. It's a like a, and I mean this in a positive way, like a simple, easy read, but with a lot of great ideas, and things that will help a lot of families, now and in the future. So thank you for doing that. I think it's a great thing that's going to help a lot of families for sure.
That means the world to me, Coach, and it was fun to write. You know, I have ADHD. You know, I self-diagnose, and to get my brain to focus for more than about 20 seconds to put together 200 words in a book was a big challenge for me. But I had a lot of fun writing it, and it was so rewarding to have coaches like you that contributed to it, because it was you know, it felt like a shared experience because of it. And I felt like I was able to give my piece of advice, but I was able to share all those people in my life that I knew had such great knowledge to share as well. So thanks for everything. Good luck this season. We'll be cheering for you, and I know you guys will end up near the top, if not the top, by the time you get to February.
Keep working at it. Same to you, Coach. Good luck to you, and good luck this weekend. Good luck
Thank
with
you,
the
Coach.
tournament this weekend.
You too. Take care, my friend.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.